And you got the tile going? All right, let me take a deep breath. All right, let's see. Welcome back to the Real Teacher Talk podcast with Mr. Nunez, a podcast about education, teachers, and students. Today we have a very special guest. We have a former U.S. Olympian and professional cyclist by the name of Antonio Tony Cruz. Welcome to our campus, Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Nunez.
First of all, just to give you a little background on what we do here. We have a little podcast that we share with our staff and students. And the point was to try to get students involved in, production and stuff like that. And what I started to do is ask questions from students, particularly about our guests. So, for example, we're going to start with the easy ones. Where did you grow up?
I grew up here locally I was born in East LA, General Hospital. And then, my family moved around a bit. My parents worked hard and were always trying to, do a better job in providing for us, me and my two sisters and the rest of our family. So we went from Boyle Heights, moved up to Huntington Park.
Hey.
So close by here, and then Southgate, and eventually ended up in the city of Whittier.
Okay.
And
stayed local, right?
Yeah, definitely local, and always rode my bike through, especially the communities that I grew up in. It's just
that's awesome,
something
man.
special about it.
So as far as your family, where are they originally from?
My parents are originally from Mexico, and I've got aunts and uncles from Mexico as well, cousins. And then a lot of, us first generation over here, raised in the U.S. that, I don't know, it's interesting. It's a nice mix because I haven't spent a lot of time in Mexico. I'm actually going to be heading over for a family vacation soon, and I'm excited about it. I've pretty much been all over the world, but haven't spent a lot of time
in Mexico.
So,
wow. What part exactly?
My dad is from Ciudad Juarez, and my mom is from Baja, from Ensenada. My grandfather was a farmer.
Okay.
Down there. So
down there, I always like asking that question because I'm pretty sure, right? It's real easy to, have family from that area. Like for example, I have family from Juarez, right? Durango. Mm-hmm. The minute you start connecting the dots, we're all related. So that's
right.
the fun part about finding out where you're from, right?
Yeah, definitely.
But that's cool. So kids also wanted to know, what was your life like as a kid? Like maybe early elementary, up to middle and then high school.
Yeah, early on, sports was always a focus with my dad. And my mom was always a really hard worker. Not that my dad wasn't, but she had more of an entrepreneurial type of spirit. She always wanted to have her own business, a lot like my grandfather, her dad was. And my dad was, 20 years in the military. So in the military, you have to be fit, you have to be disciplined, you have to be punctual, and you have to be able to follow orders and directions to the T in order to be successful. And I think I learned a lot of, from the two of them, just having that drive and spirit to go after something, even though you're not quite sure what it's going to be. And then the discipline around that to be able to follow through. So as a kid, those are sort of the things that I would say, I took from my parents. And sports, again, was always on television, was always talked about, whether it was with friends or with my parents, but especially with my dad. We were always, out doing stuff together, sports.
So he was active, and I'm assuming, okay, so you pretty much had a military dad, and just thinking about all Latino dads, right? They're kind of, strict to begin with.
Yeah.
So then you had a dad who was a military dad. So could I ask if he was maybe like your hero or someone you looked up to? Because some of that had to have rubbed off, right? And if you could talk about other heroes as well.
Yeah, he was definitely a hero and inspiration for me growing up because he got into cycling by necessity. I think only had one car for a while. He bought a bike, had to ride his bike from Southgate. I think he was working in Long Beach at McDonnell Douglas at the time. And, he had to commute by bike to work.
Travel back and forth, huh?
Yeah. And, of course, he was already, pretty fit just from all the different types of sports that he played. Um, and so, he enjoyed riding the bike more and more. Found out, I believe, there was a club there,
Mm.
and became part of that club. They invited him on some rides, like centuries, things like that. And things just kind of, in terms of cycling, organically grew from there for him. And when he got his first like nice road bike,
Mm-hmm.
I just remember like, man, I can't wait till one day when I have one of these to ride and I can go as fast as my dad. So definitely looked up to him.
That's awesome. Yeah, most parents, I mean, they do that even today. I think most of our community has to find a way to get around. And now you have, buses that carry bicycles now, which back then, that's probably one of the reasons why your dad had to go back and forth on a bike, right? Because they didn't have those routes with the nice bike rack on front of the bus, right?
They didn't have any of that. As a matter of fact, if you saw the bus or heard the bus, you just and you were on the bike, you needed to get out of the way.
That's how things are scary, huh?
It was a different time, especially when my dad was commuting. And I think too, like for many years, it seemed, even when I started riding, cyclists were viewed more as second-class citizens, maybe people who couldn't afford to drive a car. And so there was some negative sort of stigmas that were associated with cycling that, I just didn't really understand and I didn't learn until later in life. I just had such a passion for being out on my bike. And I didn't need to have the nicest bike or the nicest equipment, because with sports, you do the talking with, for cycling with your legs. You don't have to always have the best gear, but if you can outperform people, that really shows the quality of the athlete and the character. And so, I would have friends that would not understand, or even sometimes make fun of me, especially once I got to high school. Like, why do you ride a bike? Like, we all have cars. Like, why don't you get a car? Well, little did they know my bike was probably, at that point, twice the price of what their cars cost.
Right.
But it just, it kind of dawned on me later on, like, I kind of am viewed as a second-class citizen, but I just stuck with it because I had a passion for it.
There it is. So I have some students from my homeroom class that have some questions for you. I have lovely Grajeda, who would like to know, what are the things you like to do besides riding?
I would say the thing I like or enjoy most besides bike riding is just being with my family, spending time with my family. I've always had a lot of family support, especially, family coming out to all my sporting events. When I went to the Olympics, we actually, I wanted to take as many family members as I could, all my tias and tios and primas that would come out to the races, on really hot days, on rainy days, and support. So we had a fundraiser, and I think we ended up taking about 20 family members, tickets to Sydney, Australia, housing, and then the Olympic Committee also provided some like free tickets for the family to be able to watch, soccer games, wrestling, a lot of the different venues. So for me, that was sort of my payback to a lot of my family
For supporting you,
supporting. So
all those
family
years.
for me, first and foremost, when I'm off the bike, that's the most important.
That's cool. Somehow I picture you riding with them. Somehow you drag them
Some
out
of
there
them.
on some of them. I figured that, right? It's like, right?
Yeah.
They just can't help it. That rides the right bike, so why not, right?
Yeah.
So I have London Saldana. I was a little sixth grader. How old were you when you first began competing?
I think I was about 13, and the way I got into my first race was my dad had just started competing. Maybe, I think he'd been racing for about 2 years, and there was a pretty strong racing calendar in Southern California that I wasn't aware. I knew where to go, play or compete in baseball or football or soccer at the time, but cycling was just so new to me. And then once I learned about this calendar, I wanted to go and see what my dad was up to, check out these races. And I think it was the second race that I went to, there was what they called an open category. And you didn't have to have a racing license, because there's a governing body for cycling, just like all the major sports. And in order to compete in sanctioned events, you have to have a license for these events. So this was kind of way for the governing body to get youths, especially, into the sport of cycling. And
how'd you do that day, or when you started? How'd you do?
I borrowed my dad's bike. He had to lower the seat all the way down. I could barely reach the pedal.